This morning's speaker, excuse me, Kevin. This morning's speaker is Mike Arndt. Mike was born and raised in Evanston, Illinois. Go Wildcats. He moved to Iowa in 1972 and graduated from Oline High School. Graduated from Central College in Pella. Began working at Youth Homes of Mid-America back in 1980 with a salary of $9,500, and he thought he was rich. He's been at Youth Homes for 34 years, and he's been executive director for almost 2 years. His wife Cindy and he live in Norwalk, and 2 children, 4 grandchildren. He's a member of the Johnston Rotary Club. And his wife works for Delta Dental. So it's a good thing Jeff Russell is not here, otherwise I don't know if Mike would be with us. But everybody please welcome Mike Arndt.
I don't get scared about much, but this group scares the hell out of me right now. I was forewarned by Steve that it was a pretty raucous group, so give me a break a little bit, and if you have questions, just jump in. I am excited to be here. First of all, I didn't know all the connections. How many of you, first of all, know where Youth Homes of Mid-America is? This always is all right, that scares me a little bit, Brad. We got some work to do. How many of you ever heard of Youth Homes of Mid-America before you saw it on the program? How about the YMCA Boys Home of Iowa? That is us still. We are in Johnston at the corner of Merle Hay and Beaver, the northeast corner. So most of you pass it, going out to Saylorville Lake, out to Hyperion. We get people pass all the time that have no clue what we're doing out there on the northeast corner of Merle Hay and Beaver. Matter of fact, I have city council people in Johnston that have come out for a visit and said, I've lived in Johnston my whole life and didn't know what you did out here. And that kind of concerns us. But the connections to this club are very interesting. Is Dan Bartlett still here? Did Dan leave? He just left? Dan's father, Paul, was board president at Youth Homes of Mid-America for many, many years and a real great leader for us. Dennis Light sitting over there. Many of you know Dennis. Dennis was a board president at Youth Homes of Mid-America for a number of years. Still very active and connected. Dennis's wife, when Dennis left, he got his wife to a job at Youth Homes, and she's been there a while. Actually, Dennis's wife is an outstanding employee for us. We have Brad Duffy, who's currently on our board, Rick Ball, who's currently on our board. Jane came up and introduced herself to me this morning, and the connection to the Sargent family at Youth Homes of Mid-America is big. So I'm excited to be here. I have some friends in the audience, so Steve said he'd have my back if this thing got out of control. I am a member of the Johnston Rotary, and the president of the Johnston Rotary has this real neat tactic, because I could go on forever. The president of Johnston Rotary, about 5 minutes late, or about 5 minutes before the speaker's supposed to get done, just kind of casually stands up and wanders the room. So I will look for a cue as to if I'm running too long. And feel free at any point to jump in and ask any questions. I always ask, or always talk about when I get together with people, do you know what we do? Do you know what Youth Homes does? Many of you know Steve Quirk, right? Steve is in the same industry I'm in. What Steve and his organization does is a little different than what we do, but we all end up trying to get to the same place. At Youth Homes of Mid-America, what I tell people is this, is that we take kids who have kind of taken a detour off life's path. Sometimes that detour is because they got pushed off the path. Sometimes it's because they made a conscious decision to get off the path. And people constantly ask me, tell me what the type of kid you have. Explain what happens to kids to get them to the point where they have to leave their home and not live with a family anymore. And I'm going to challenge you to this right now. I would, and especially paying attention to this group the first 15 minutes I was here, I would make a wager and be pretty confident in that wager that most of the people in this room at one time or another got off a path. Is that fair to say? I'd like you to do a little exercise with me real quick. You don't have to shut your eyes, but it helps if you do. Go back to 14, 15, 16 years old. You were a kid. Go back there for a minute. For most of us, it was a pretty fun time, pretty exciting time. You're a kid now, 14, 15, 16 years old, somewhere in there, and you got in trouble. You got off the path, And all of you did, I think, at one point. If you didn't, you missed a great opportunity. You got off the path, all right? You were somewhere you shouldn't be. Your car was in the ditch. You were doing things wrong. Right now, I want you to, who was the person that you knew had your back? Who was the person you could call? Who was a person without fear, or maybe some fear, but not fear of physical retribution? Who was that person? Who was that shining light in your life that you knew could help you? You got that person? Someone want to share? Anybody? Come on now, don't go shy on me. Dennis, who was that person?
A parent.
A parent? Anybody else? Come on.
Brother.
A brother? Anybody? Coach? Teacher?
Pediatrician.
Say that again?
Pediatrician.
A pediatrician? Someone you developed a relationship with? Anybody else? What was the answer over here?
Come to Blake.
Yeah, he said parole officer.
That's not too far from reality for some of our kids, right?
Minister.
A minister. Most of us could pick that person out right away. Most of us had multiple people that could pick out. Mom, dad, a brother, a good friend. When I ask kids, when we talk to kids at Youth Homes of America, and I guarantee that's the same with Steve and his kids, and we ask them, who was that person in their life? Who is that person in your life? What do we get? We get blank stares. They don't have them. And therein lies the difference between when we got off the path and when our kids get off the path. Our kids get off the path and they start to wander, and there's no one to bring them back. There's no direction. And I'm not going to sit up here, we don't have time to tell, I could tell horror stories. You know, a lot of times people believe that we're in Iowa. Iowa is kind of insulated from what happens in Omaha or Chicago or big cities where you hear about major issues with kids. Trust me, on a smaller scale, Des Moines has its share of problems, or central Iowa, or Iowa in general. We have kids that come to us, and again, if you want the stories, ask Steve. We have kids that come to us. The level of abuse, you would not believe me if I told you the story. You wouldn't believe it. You'd say, it doesn't happen. That's fairy tale, textbook, case study stuff. It happens all the time. And so what happens is we have kids that fall off a path. And they're 15, 16. In some cases, I know Steve has a crisis nursery. Those kids are off the path before they know they're supposed to be on a path. What's the youngest kid you serve, Steve?
3 days old.
3 days old. There are kids in our community that are 3 days old that are not on a path. Now, that's not their choosing whether they're on that path or not. But it happens, and it happens regularly. And I won't get too far into what happens in our system, in our bureaucracy, what happens to kids when they get off the path. But the reality is, to get them back on the path takes a ton of work. And the farther they are off the path, the harder it is to get them back on. And so what we do at Youth Homes of America, and I know what Steve does and all of our peers do, is we try to present a path to kids and help them move there. Now, this is important. I can't put a kid on a path, and I can't do it for them. We have a lot of families that come to us, a lot of kids that come to us that say, kind of do it for me. Show me the way, put me on the path, give me a program, give me instruction. We can't do that. We can help them see a path. We can help them find a path, but we can't do it for them. We have kids, when I get a kid, our average age right now is 14 and a half at youth homes. So we don't have the younger kids like Steve does, but I get a kid at 14 and a half that's been off the path for several years. It is a journey getting them back on. And I don't have a path for them. Youth Homes believes this. Your path is your path. Everyone in this room lived a different path. There are no two paths the same. I can't say to a kid, here's the way we do it at Youth Homes. We have a path that if you do this, this, and this, you get here. We say, here's an opportunity. Where you end up at the end is your determination, is your making. And so some of our kids, they don't find that path very quickly. Some do. So part of putting kids on that path, which is interesting to me, is the educational piece of that. And I'll talk just a minute about that. Our kids come to us on average, 5 grade years behind. Now think about that for a minute. You're 14 years old. At 14, you should be 8th grade, right? Somewhere in that ballpark. We have kids come to us at 14 years old, and they're still at the 5th grade level educationally. All of you know what that means for their future, right? As far as employment, as far as anything goes in the future for them, if I can't get kids on a educational path very, very quickly, they're in trouble. And so Youth Homes of Mid-America takes great pride in the fact that our educational system is through the Johnston Community School District. That's a big part of what we do. Credit recovery, credit makeup, getting kids involved in all the great programs that are out there educationally to help kids get on a path and catch up. And they do a great job of it. Some don't make it, some have to go the GED route. Nothing wrong with GED. But as an employer, and you look at it, and there's a GED bias, if you look at a person's resume and you have one applicant that graduated from Roosevelt and one applicant that got his GED, who are you looking at first? Probably the Roosevelt grad. That's just a reality of what our kids deal with. So I will, are we good on time? You're not standing up walking around yet, so Steve told me that this group usually has a lot of questions. So what I want to talk to you or finish with is the path that we create for kids doesn't come easy, and it doesn't come cheap either. And I'm not here to solicit, Steve probably does that regularly for me, solicit funds from this group. But
I do have raffle tickets.
Brad can do that later. Here's what happens in Iowa as far as the kids that are trying to find that path. Because of our bureaucracy, because of what happens, Steve, for an example, can have a 7-year-old that does exceptionally well while he's at Yes and makes all kinds of progress. Unfortunately, the family isn't in the same boat, all right? The kid's kicking butt while he's getting services, but the family is still in crisis, still doing things they shouldn't be doing, still blocking that child's path. But what happens in our system is all of a sudden the kid does well, but he bumps up against time frames or dollar amounts or whatever, and Steve has to say, I'll see you later. So the kid re-enters a situation that's not all the time positive. That doesn't happen all the time, right, Steve? Steve's very successful with some of the kids. But so the kid re-enters, now he's back in this cycle where he falls off that path again. When I get kids, they've averaged 5 to 6 other placements. They have been 5 to 6 other places and failed before they get to us. And what's different about us is when they get there is we make no pretense about the fact that you're going to be successful. You're going to reach a point where you can go back into the community and be a functioning, happy, healthy adult. What we say is, look, you have some opportunities here, and the reality is you're probably going to have to deal with that nonsense once you leave here. So what's unique is that we prepare kids to go back into dysfunction. If I have a 17-year-old kid who is at grade level, he's playing on the Johnston football team, he's working in the community, he's doing great, and everything in his life is clicking right now, and he is on his path. The state of Iowa will tell me he's doing really well, we're not paying for him anymore, he's got to leave. And that's just the way our system works. Now, our organizations do have some dollars available that allow kids to continue services outside of that system, but they're far and few in between. So I have a young man, he's doing well, everything's clicking, he's got a discharge date now, and where's he going? He's going back into an environment where the single mom doesn't have a job, doesn't much care about this young man, or at least his welfare. And again, this is where I could get into the horror stories. So what I have to teach kids, what we have to teach kids is you have to live independently of that, or you have to live with that in your life. And it's kind of a shift in, for years we pounded the fact that we've got to fix the family, we've got to fix the kid, and everyone's going to come together and they're all going to be on a path. We don't have the time to do that anymore. But do you know what your average life to stay is?
46 days.
46 days. Steve gets an opportunity for 46 days to impact a kid. I get about 3.5 to 4 months to impact a kid. That's down significantly. Back in 1980 when I started, we could raise kids if we needed to. And nobody likes to hear that, but there are kids that don't have places to go. Not anymore. I don't get to raise kids anymore. Not that I want to raise all of them. I want them to be in their home. I want their home to be functional and happy and healthy. Kind of the homes that most of us grew up in. So with that said, Youth Homes of Mid-America, we've been there since 1943. Come out and visit us sometime. If you're ever in the area, you're welcome to stop in. my greatest catch for people is letting them meet kids. I constantly have people say, you know, they come in, they think the kids have green skin and look weird, and they're not. They're the kids we grew up, the kids your kids hang out with. They just got off the path a little bit, and they're looking for a way to get back on it. So with that said, I'll open up to questions, and between Steve and I, I'm sure we can answer any questions. Go ahead, Dennis.
Mike, why don't you go into a little bit about how the youth come to Mid-America?
Yeah, that's a great, you know, the system brings kids in, and someone talked about a probation officer. Our kids come in usually through 2 doors. Steve has another door that we typically don't have. But our kids come in through either the juvenile court or the Department of Human Services. They've either been identified, they've gotten involved in juvenile court because there's for lack of a better term, there's a crime that's been committed. They've broken the law. So they get a probation officer. They come in through the juvenile court door, or they come from such a dysfunctional family, they've been severely abused, or there's been neglect, or they've been identified as a child in need of assistance, and they come in through the Department of Human Services door. Doesn't really matter, they're all the same kid. If you're I grew up, moved to Owine when I was a freshman in high school. In Owine, Iowa, if you steal a bicycle, it's different than stealing a bicycle if you're in Des Moines, all right? Small town Iowa, if you shoplift or get caught doing something, there is a different set of consequences that are in Des Moines. Des Moines doesn't have time to mess with shoplifters and bicycle stealers. I shouldn't say they don't have time to mess with them, but it's not the same consequence. So we have kids coming in both doors regularly. The reality is a juvenile court kid, whether you've been involved with the law or you've been a child in need of assistance, they're the same kid. You can't tell the difference. A child in need of assistance has committed a crime or been involved in breaking the law, and a kid who's been in the juvenile court system has probably been neglected and probably had a difficult road in that side. So, go ahead.
How do you measure success?
That's a great question. We are not, there are not many Boys Town. Boys Town is the national standard for measuring success. Because of the dollars they have, they can do these longitudinal studies that show where kids, we don't have the ability to do that. Number one, there's issues of privacy and issues of can you follow kids and knowing where they're at. Our success is, to some degree, we can measure success when they come in the front door and when they leave. So we measure what they're doing educationally. We can measure what they're doing behaviorally. We can measure what they're doing as far as achieving goals. Once they leave, for the most part, we lose track of them unless they re-enter the system somewhere. So anecdotally, we hear about our kids, and Steve can speak to this too. I cannot go anywhere in Des Moines on a regular basis that someone doesn't come up to me and say, hey, is your name Mike, or do you work at youth homes? It just happens at the State Fair. This is my fun story. I park in my car at the State Fair, and a gentleman parking me, long hair, tattoos all over, came up to me and says, is your name Mike? And I said, yeah. And he said, my name's Randy. Do you remember me? Well, I remembered him, and we had a conversation. After Randy left youth homes, he'd gone to prison and served some time. And I asked him, how are you doing now? He said, really well. I got a job. I'm doing this. And this is what he said to me, and it was really interesting. He said, I knew sitting in the prison, my prison cell, the opportunity you gave me, the stuff that you guys talked to me about, I knew. So I knew it was now my issue, my fault. We'd given him an opportunity, he didn't take it. And isn't that true? How many things did your parents try to teach you when you were 14 that you kind of said, yeah, right, Dad, right, Mom, you don't know crap, I know it all. And then you kind of came back to it when you were 23 or 24 or when you started having your own kids. That's really what happens at Youth Homes of Mid-America too. We'd like to do, I'm sure Steve would too, more follow-up, but it's just not, it's very expensive to do.
From the standpoint of a lot of these kids, they've suffered a lot of consequences. I mean, it just doesn't seem to, when it gets to you, when they get to you, I mean, they've had a lot of punishment. So what is your, and it's probably I don't know if you can answer the question or not, but the balance between the rewards and consequences for these kids to turn them around and get them on the right path.
Well, the balance is the out of balance nature of rewards versus punishment. Think back again when you were a kid. That person that you were just thinking about that counted on you, wasn't there a reward side of that too? It wasn't. most of us grew up in an environment where there was praise. Hey, nice job on that test, or I watched you in that band performance. And our kids come to us and they know what consequences are. They know what punishment is. Matter of fact, they're pros at it. They know the system better than any of our staff, and they manipulate the crap out of it. So punishment for us are what we call natural consequences. If you do something wrong, we sit, and it's kind of a reality-based, if you do something wrong, what are the natural consequences? What comes from that? You know, sticking a kid in his room for 2 hours or that kind of stuff is short-term, doesn't really work for kids. It's sitting the kid down when they do something and trying to help them understand that this is how that got you off the path and this is how you can get back on. Consequences are really tricky with our kids. Punitive stuff. Go ahead. I'm pointing at 2 people. Go ahead.
Question, what would be your average daily census and how far of a region do you serve?
Thank you. Right now, our programs are fairly expansive, but our residential program, our flagship, is all boys, 50 boys we have the occupancy to go higher, but 50 is the number we like to hold it at. And our boys are averaging length of stay, like I said, is about 3.5, 4.5 months, 14.5 years old. There's a real need to serve girls. You guys have all been reading about Toledo in the paper and where those kids go, who serves those kids. And by the way, as a little offshoot, Toledo serves about 50 to 55 kids. They have about the same population as youth homes. Their budget, their state budget last year was almost $10 million if you had everything in. At Youth Homes of Mid-America, we have 50 to 55 kids, and our budget last year was just under $3 million. And I think we do a better job, obviously. We do a better job with Toledo. So, is it Bob, by the way?
Yes, it is.
I used to play basketball with Bob years and years ago, and I see him staring me down. I'll tell stories about Bob afterwards if you want to hear about it.
I'm curious, and you may or may not know this, but what percentage of the homes that these kids come out of, and maybe what percentage of the kids themselves, is there a drug and alcohol issue, and do you treat those issues at all, or is that a separate?
Great question. It's a high percentage. Right now, of the kids that we're serving, all of our kids have had drug or alcohol exposure and use, some more severe. About 45 to 50% of our kids right now are in a specific drug and alcohol program. We do treat that. One of the things that we like to say at Youth Homes is we find if a kid comes to us and he has an issue, we find a program for him. And if we're not experts in it and can't become expert in it, we'll find someone else that is. So drug and alcohol is a big issue. And the marijuana issue is coming back. When I started in 1980, we spent a whole lot of time as staff trying to find pot. It was a big issue. And then it kind of moved away for a while, and it's back with a vengeance right now. And it's illegal, and I'm not going to make any other political comment about pot but the fact is our kids use it, and they use it as a crutch, or they use it as a escape mechanism. So it's pretty high. Would you know in your place? High percentage? Yeah.
To what extent do you have associations with faith-based organizations or faith-based curriculum?
Here's what we believe. We believe the spiritual side of a kid's growth is really important. We don't prescribe any particular faith-based program or curriculum. What happens is when kids come to us, we give them the opportunity to explore that. So we have connections throughout the community that if a kid wants to explore a certain church or a certain avenue or certain faith, we set that up and allow them to do that. I could spend a whole nother hour, and I'll have a beer with you sometime to talk about some of the issues with kids and faith and how it helps or doesn't help at some point. But we allow kids to do that and have some kids that are very strongly involved in their faith, and then some kids who have, like so many other things in their life, have thrown that off as to something else that I tried that didn't work. Go ahead.
You mentioned that in the early 80s you had much more significant funding. I'm curious what the difference is between then and now in terms of what funding sources have dried up or grown.
That's a $64 million question. 80% of our funding comes from our contracts with the state. And so as the state goes, so do we go. Steve and I were just talking. We got a 5% rate increase last year, and we danced for a week. It was the first rate increase we'd gotten in 8 years, and only the second we'd gotten in 10 years. So what happens is our costs go up. You know, the cost of milk, we have to feed 50 boys. The cost of milk goes up. The cost of gas goes up. Insurance goes up. Everything goes up. We have to pay our staff. So as everything moves up, here's what happens in the state, and we're not going to get too far in the bureaucracy, but the state counts on organizations like us and like Steve's to raise dollars. That is part of their thinking is Youth Homes of Mid-America, we can pay them on the cheap because they can go out and raise other dollars. We have our own separate foundation that we have to make up that other 20%. It's a significant number. So the state doesn't give us a lot of, right now, I don't know what my state reimbursement will be for next year. I'm planning a budget and I have no clue what the state's going to give me. And it's an issue. Steve's on the Hill more than I am. He can tell you all about it.
You've spoken earlier about previously working with families and stuff. Is there a follow-up plan for the families and such? Or
Good question.
Other organizations that you work with?
Yeah, we still work with families. We have therapists and we have family counselors. When you come to us, family's important. And you got to understand this. I came out of a family, not me, but I'm a kid at Youth Homes. I came out of a family who severely abused me. And I mean abused me to the point where I have some issues. You know what? I still want to go home. That's still my family. Forever and ever, that's going to be my family. No matter how dysfunctional it is, the kid wants to get there. So we continually work with families. Our doors are always open to families. It's their level of engagement that really makes the difference. So when a kid leaves Youth Homes of Mid-America, they all have a plan, as they do when they leave Steve's place. Every kid has a plan going out about what comes next. So we do have some families that for a long period of time continue to come back and continue to work. I don't want to make it sound like every family out there has abandoned their kids. We have some great families who have made great strides and really want their kids to succeed. And once they get those skills and get on their path, they're fine. So aftercare, our system allows, to our system's credit, has done a great job over the last 5-10 years creating alternatives or creating the ability for families to stay engaged.
Mike mentioned reward and punishment consequences, and I've always felt like there was another issue there. I grew up with in a single parent family, and at those rare times when I might have begun to stray just a little bit, I had a set of expectations that had been put into me since I was a little kid. And I was driven back because of those expectations. Is that something that's just missing from your family? Do these kids just do not have expectations to live up to?
I don't know if I can answer that. I believe we would all like, how many of you here right now believe that the kids of our generation, when we were growing up, the kids today are worse. The kids today have it better. The kids today don't have expectations. I would tell you this, and I see my time's running out. I've been at Youth Homes for 34 years. Kids have not changed. I think kids are smart. They know what expectations are. Here's the difference, I believe. I believe it wasn't the expectations that brought you back, and I'll end on this. It's about relationships. When I was a kid, I didn't do things right because I was afraid of the consequence. I did things right when I did things right because I wanted to please my father or I wanted to please my mother. It's about making a connection with an adult, and that's what we believe in at Youth Homes. I'm confident Steve's. It's about the relationship. Kids don't get better and change because we have expectations, rules, and punishment. They change because they finally find someone to hook on to that they say, I want to make that person happy. That person is important in my life. And hopefully someday that becomes them internally. With that said, I appreciate you letting me ramble on for a while. I appreciate Brad inviting me. You're welcome at Youth Homes anytime. Give us a holler and I'd love to show you around. Thanks for having me.